Hi, my name is Dr. Linda Mattioli, and I am very excited to give you a demonstration of the Revelia application. So right now I am logged in as a practitioner, and as you can see up at the top, I'm in patient Danielle Cullen's chart and her initial visit. Now, up at the top, you'll see Reveal, Analyze, Discover, Take Control of Your Health. Reveal correlates to forms. So this is where the patient is giving us information about themselves so we can learn more about them. Once we analyze that data in the Reports and Labs tab, we've moved on to Analyze. So this is a very clear roadmap of what I have learned to be a really beautiful way of connecting with patients and not only establishing that rapport of trust, but also education and motivation and also clinical decision making. So it's all everything into one. And then we move on to education. So once the patient has this unique analysis of their intake forms as well as their labs, now we move on to educating them about the basic anatomy, physiology of the body and what might be occurring for them. And then we move on to plans. So let's break down each of these components one by one. These forms, we have developed the Revelia forms that come with the platform. The practitioner also has the ability to upload their own forms if they want. But the original forms every question has been scored for the analysis section. Also, within each section, especially with the past medical history and current symptoms, these are responsive forms. So if I were to click on poor memory, I will then be asked the frequency, the intensity of this symptom, as well as when I first started experiencing it and how I'm managing it. Now, for past medical history, it's similar in that I'm going to be clicking my diagnoses, but here not only am I being asked about the timeline of this diagnosis, but also if I'm being treated by a healthcare provider and what am I doing for this. This is very important for when these forms are submitted, because then the practitioner has the ability to export the data down here with this button and read through it so they have a very clear understanding of the patient before each visit. Not only do we ask the patient the questions like allergies, medical history, and symptoms, but we're also getting very clear information about their lifestyle habits, like their nutrition, exercise, stress management, environmental toxin exposure, in addition to significant life events, history, surgical history, things like that. And then also their readiness to change, their personal goals for themselves. So once these forms are submitted, this will be happening before the appointment. Then the practitioner will then either add a new form. So if I've read through these forms and I have additional questions before the patient comes in, I can upload that at this time and the patient can fill it out, or I can move on to generating the report. Once the report is generated, so right away at the very top, I'm seeing the patient's symptom trend. So this is an initial visit, so there's not a trend at this time, but I'll be able to see from appointment to appointment how their symptoms are going. We also then move on to the areas of focus graph. So this is a real motivating factor, not only for the patient, but also it aids with clinical decision making for the practitioner. We want the patient to be in this bullseye. So this is their the ideal score that we want for them. So the more spread out these data points are, the more imbalanced that the patient is. And this is drawing from data, not only from the forms, but also from the labs that we have uploaded. So it's both subjective and objective data. Now, just looking at this graph, I can tell for this patient that we really need to focus on their nervous system. We also need to focus on their hormones and their gut. So I would be explaining to the patient, these are the three areas that this is the common thread throughout our discussion during this appointment to help manage their symptoms and treat their disease. We have embedded education throughout this entire system. So not only can the patient see this graph on their end, so they can see the entire report in their portal as well, but they can also begin to educate themselves. So after they go home, they can share with their loved one information about the nervous system. They can click on gut, read about that as well, hormones, and so on and so forth. That goes through all the different parts of the areas of focus graph. They can also see what they clicked on throughout the forms that gave an additional weighted score for this area. So we're embedding that education and that feedback throughout the report. We've also included a lifestyle and emotional index. This is very important so that when the practitioner starts talking about lifestyle changes or stress management changes, the patient can see objectively how much this part is weighing on the disease burden of their body. So that can be trended as well over time, which is really motivating as well. This timeline is how we organize the information throughout the patient's life. So we always ask them the age that they last felt well. So this timeline is divided into age last felt well, change of health event, which is that event where the patient noticed that things really started changing for them, their past medical history, current symptoms, as well as significant life events and surgeries. Not only is this timeline a discussion of age, but I can also toggle over here and really see what symptom or disease the patient actually mentioned. So this creates a really nice place for discussion in that I can see this triggering event for this patient and what symptoms or past medical history diagnoses occurred after that. So not only is this an enlightening conversation and you get to really see what this patient has been through throughout their life, but also it helps with my decision making again. So I know this was the triggering event. I need to really focus on environmental toxins, detoxification, things like that, in order to really help this patient heal. So it helps us understand the driving forces of disease and symptoms. This underneath that is a table. This is just a different way of displaying that same data, if that's easier for patients to understand and people to understand. This is the symptom ranking. So these are my patients' top 5 symptoms that they want to focus on this visit. And then we also break down their symptom score into intensity and frequency trends, and then as well as by body system. So that is the report that I will go over with the patient during the appointment after I take their history. Next, we move on to their labs. I will upload the patient's lab prior to them coming in, and I'm able to not only create a trend table so I can see how their labs improve over time, but I can also have a discussion of what each interpretation means. So with all the labs that are uploaded, so let me show you from a patient standpoint. So now I'm logged in as a patient. So if I go to their initial visit under labs, I can look at my lab review. A lot of times what happens is patients don't really understand what each lab marker means. So this is the ability for the doctor to not only, or clinician, to describe it to them, but they can also log in on their own and read through it on their own time as well. They also have access to their lab trend table in addition to that. The next part of the appointment then naturally goes into education. So once the patient has has this information about themselves, these are all unique graphs and tables that are for them at this particular point in time. Now we need to start discussing what all this means from a medical standpoint and an anatomy physiology standpoint for them. So this is where these handouts really come in handy, because even if I have a telemedicine appointment, I can discuss how sex hormones affect the thyroid and cortisol and so on and so forth. I can highlight specific areas and type some notes so they can see that. So they can have these handouts, they can review them on their own time as well, but it really rounds out the discussion. So then when we get to the plan section and I'm offering nutrition recommendations, exercise recommendations, along with medications, supplements, labs, they have a real full understanding about what all this means and why I'm recommending what I'm recommending. So from a patient standpoint, this is what the plan looks like. And as a physician, I can upload a template or I can just free type whatever I need to. But I have really clear directions for what I need to be doing. And at this point, I shouldn't have any question as to why I need to work on my sleep or nervous system. I already know that because my areas of focus graph was so imbalanced in that area. I think all too often patients go home and they don't really understand why they're being told to do what they need to do. And so I have found over the years as a clinician that this format really helps with connection, motivation, engagement, and ultimately improved clinical outcomes. Thank you, and please reach out with any questions.